I wanted the American voter to have as much information as possible going into the 2020 election, which they clearly didn't have going into 2016. And I hoped anyway that coupled with the evidence of his increasingly cruel, bizarre behavior would help make the case more effectively.
But you know what the critics of you say, you know what Donald Trump and those around him say about this book is that your father, Freddie, died so young, sadly died at the age of 42 after a long battle with alcoholism. You and your brother got cut out of the will from Fred, the grandfather, and that you're bitter, and this is why you've written the book.
You know, if that had been the case, I could have and should have written the book 5 or 10 years ago when Donald was a very well-known public figure, but didn't have the power he now has to retaliate against private citizens. Also, that lawsuit was 20 years ago. I've lived a lot of my life since then, and it would be a sad commentary on me if I had been hanging on to any bitterness. I wrote the book primarily as an American citizen, not so much as his niece, and certainly not somebody who was looking for revenge.
Well, you're now a trained psychologist, a qualified psychologist. As a clinician, say you were someone outside, how would you analyze Donald Trump as a patient?
You know, I don't think we need necessarily to know what happened to him at 2.5 to realize that this is somebody who has serious psychological disorders that have never been treated and continue to worsen over time. I think his behavior and his comments just lay bare the essential nature of this man. He is a weak person who feels the need to portray himself as strong. He's willing to sacrifice anybody on the altar of that endeavor. By saying the things he's been saying, he has put in danger millions more Americans by telling them to go out and not be afraid of something that can kill you, and it is killing people every day.
Well, you're very clear in the book he's not just bad, as you describe it, at managing this crisis. You say no one is less equipped than my uncle to manage. No one. You say he's the worst.
Yeah, and I think we saw that from the very beginning, and partially it's directly because of his psychopathologies. He was incapable of admitting the severity of COVID-19 from the start because he cannot be associated with any negativity whatsoever. And then he was incapable of course correcting because course correcting means that you did something wrong. And he can't admit that he's wrong.
Can I just ask you about the unrest we've seen on the streets of so many American cities, in particular since the death of George Floyd? And this statement, again, from the book, I can only imagine, you say, that Donald wished it had been his knee on George Floyd's neck. That is quite something to say.
Donald is a very weak person. And essentially, he's a terrified little boy, and he expends an enormous amount of energy trying to keep himself from that reality and trying to keep other people from finding that out. So he needs to pretend he's a tough guy. But if you look at his statements historically, at his rallies, for example, he's always telling other people to commit the violence. He's never the one saying he's going to take care of it because he's a physical coward, and it makes him feel important, I guess, to get other people to do his bidding. But it makes him incredibly dangerous because we always have to remember that a lot of his motivations for doing the things he does, like calling in the National Guard or people who don't seem to be affiliated with any police force that we're aware of, to sic them on peaceful protesters is to assuage his own fragile ego.
And I don't, I suspect after this conversation, need to ask you which way you are going to vote, but you also feel again from the book that if Donald Trump is re-elected, it will be the end, you say, of American democracy.
It's hard to argue that our institutions have not been under assault since January 2017. We are losing faith in them because they're being undermined at every turn, from the State Department and the Justice Department to the Post Office, which is something I never thought I would have to say. Even things like NOAA, which help us understand and track hurricanes, have been under assault. So I don't think it's an overstatement at this point to suggest that American democracy, which is already under threat, uh, is going to erode even farther. And honestly, that's the least of it.